Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I'm going to be sharing with you 10 authors that I would love to read from. So very recently I posted a video that was reacting to one of the first videos I ever made on my channel, which was nearly 3 years ago now, and that video was once again the top 10 authors I would like to read from. When I reacted to that video, I discovered that I had actually read the majority of authors that I said that I wanted to in 2017, and I thought that I would make a new top 10 authors TBR video because I noticed when I reacted to that video that while my tastes have not necessarily changed, back when I made that original video, there were a lot of very hyped booktube authors that I had not read because I had only actually been watching booktube for a couple of months before I started my own channel. Now that I am a booktuber, I have read a lot of hyped authors. I'm constantly up to date on newer authors and authors that everybody loves. So this list was a little bit harder to make with me having read a lot more books and a wider range of books and authors. And I also feel like it includes some authors that are not necessarily less popular, but authors that are not at such a level of hype as the authors in the video I made in 2017. So the authors I have included in this video, they all have multiple books or multiple series out, and I am interested in more than one of their works. And all of the authors I will be mentioning today, I have never read a book by. So I will be starting off with the author that's a little bit of an exception in this video, and that is Myra Grant. Now Myra Grant is also known as Shauna Maguire, and she writes the Wayward Children series. I have read the first 3 books in the Wayward Children series, and while I can't say from experience because I have never read a book by her writing as Myra Grant, I assume from the synopses of her books that when she writes under Myra Grant, she writes very different stories. So Myra Grant actually has quite a few series out. The one that I'm most interested in reading is Feed. It is the only one of her books that I own, and this one is a sci-fi dystopian set in 2014 in a world where humanity has made a lot of medical advances. We have conquered the common cold, we have conquered cancer. However, in the midst of all these scientific breakthroughs, a new virus has arisen that attacks the human brain and compels them to feed. I really love highly logical, very science-based science fiction, and this series was specifically recommended to me because of that. Myra Grant very often crosses the line between science fiction and horror, which is something that I really enjoy because for me, horror is infinitely more scary if it has some logic behind it, if there is an element that this could be vaguely possible. I am no longer scared of things like vampires because they are mythological horror aspects. I am now infinitely more scared of anything to do with health, environmental collapse, technological advancements, and politics. So those are the kind of things that actually scare me, and I really like that Myra Grant seems to write books that are equally science-based and horrific. The other book that I'm most interested in by Myra Grant is Into the Droning Deep. This is a story that follows a group of people who are investigating mermaids, and these aren't the pretty Ariel type mermaids. These are very vicious and horrific creatures, and while these scientists are on an expedition, I'm assuming they do encounter mermaids and things go terribly wrong. Next up, I will run through the authors that I don't currently own any books by, as those are the ones that I know the least about. Spoiler alert, we're gonna get into some fantasy romance here. So first up we have Ilona Andrews, or Iona Andrews, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce her name, and she is an urban fantasy author. Now she has written quite a few series, but there are 2 that I am more interested in than the others. The first one of those I believe is her most popular, and that is the Kate Daniels series. As far as I'm aware, this is a more traditional urban / contemporary fantasy that follows a woman in a city that, because of technological advancement, I believe, magic has actually re-risen up and is now taking over the city. I don't know the specifics, but this has been recommended to me a lot based on my recent discovery that I would like to explore a lot more fantasy romance, and I'm willing to trust you guys on this one. The second of her series that I am interested in is the Innkeeper Chronicles. I think the first book in this series is called Clean Sweep. I'm actually not sure if all of the books in this series follow different characters, but I do know that the first book follows a woman who runs an inn in Texas, and she regularly has supernatural and magical guests that come to visit her. There is a romance in this, I definitely know that much, but you guys have been recommending me Ilona Andrews a lot, so I'm definitely going to try and read a few of her books sometime anytime soon. Next up we have Grace Travon, who actually has a book that is in the #1 spot of a list of popular fantasy romance authors on Goodreads. Her most notable book, I believe, is Radiance. This book has an arranged marriage plotline, which is something that I am recently noticing that may not be my favorite, but as this is the most popular fantasy romance according to Goodreads, and once again you guys have been recommending that I read Grace Travon, I'm definitely willing to give it a go. As well as that, we also have Master of Crows. This is the first book in another series, and this one follows a woman who has agreed to spy on somebody to earn her freedom from her masters. I think the masters are mages. However, she very quickly begins to fall in love with her target. So both of these series do sound very interesting to me. As I am quite new into delving into adult fantasy romance, I'm not looking into them too much. I'm not judging them too much on what I usually like in books, as this is a new genre for me. And of course you guys have been recommending Grace Travon, and she is very popular on Goodreads, so I'm gonna give her a go. We then have Juliette Marlia, who I believe writes slightly romantic stories. I'm not sure if she would be classed as fantasy romance, but she is once again an author with a number of series I would like to read. The most notable one, and I believe her most popular, is the Seven Waters series, the first book of which is Daughter of the Forest. I don't know too much about the plot lines of her books. I think that Daughter of the Forest does have an arranged marriage, and I believe that there's trigger warnings for sexual assault in there. But Juliette Marlia typically writes books that are full of things like Celtic folklore. There's a lot of fairy tale aspects in there, and she also writes fae stories, which you guys know is something that I love. The second series that I'm very interested in by her is the Wildwood series, which I believe follows a group of sisters and once again has fae in it. So I really don't know too much about Juliette Marlia, but I think that her stories are very lush, have a lot of nature magic, are quite slow but very well written and atmospheric, and that is definitely something I'm into. And the last author that I don't own any books by is a little bit different from the rest of the ones on this list, as it is just a straight romance author, but that is Penelope Douglas. Now, Chandler from Chandler Ainsley has just done a whole video that is a guide to Penelope Douglas. I am a big fan of authors like Colleen Hoover and Taylor Jenkins Reid that write very dramatic romance stories, and I believe that Penelope Douglas is another author who does do that. She is a new adult author. I don't think I have ever read from an author that is as new adult as Penelope Douglas, and she also explores taboo romance, which is something else that I really love. I really like my fantasy and science fiction to be as realistic and logical as possible so they're believable, but I like my contemporary stories to be as dramatic, angsty and taboo as possible. It's weird, but it's how I roll. So like with Colleen Hoover and Taylor Jenkins Reid, I would eventually like to read all of Penelope Douglas, but the two of her stories that I am most interested in is Birthday Girl, which I think is a taboo romance featuring an older gentleman, and also I think it's called Punk 52 or Punk 57, which I think is a bully romance with an emo bad boy, which, I mean, you can see why I would be attracted to that. So moving on to the authors that I do actually own books by, I would very much like to read a book by Naomi Novik. Naomi Novik is a very fairy tale-esque fantasy author that I would say is most famous for Uprooted, which is a fairy tale story. However, Uprooted is not one of the books that I would most like to read from Naomi Novik. I am most interested in her Tremor series, which is quite long. The books are short, but the series is pretty lengthy. In the UK, the first book is called Tremor, but I think in the US it's called His Majesty's Dragon or Her Majesty's Dragon. And while I don't know the specifics of the plot of this series, I do know that it is a retelling of the Napoleonic War but featuring dragons. I don't love historical stories, so that's the only thing that's really putting me off this, but I do really love stories with dragons, and I'm excited to see how Naomi Novik has spun this one. And the other series I would really like to read from Naomi Novik is one that she hasn't released yet. She has recently announced that she will be releasing a book in a brand new series called the Scholomance series, which is a story that takes place in a magic school where if you fail you die. I expect this to have a lot of dark academia as well as those magic school vibes that everybody absolutely loves, so I'm extremely excited for that one. Next up we have Grady Hendricks, who is a horror author. The thing that appeals to me the most about Grady Hendricks is that his stories seem to be very creative. The book by him I am most interested in reading is Horror Store, which is a book that is designed to look like an IKEA IKEA catalogue. This is pretty much a horror story that takes place in IKEA. For the sake of copyright reasons, this store is called Orsk, but after a whole ton of strange things happen, some of these staff members decide to stay in the store overnight and see if they can get to the bottom of what is going on. And the other book I would like to read by Grady Hendricks is My Best Friend's Exorcism. Now, the main appeal to me from this is that this is set in the 80s. I believe that the plot line is kind of a basic exorcism story, but I know that every chapter title in this book is a 80s song, and my favorite decade is actually the 80s. I have to say, I didn't live through it. I wasn't even born in the 80s, but I love the fashion and the music of the 80s, so I'm very much looking forward to getting those 80s vibes from this. Next up, we have N.K. Jemisin, who is an author that writes really dense adult fantasy. The series by her I'm most interested in is the Broken Earth trilogy. I believe that this one broke records, as it is the only series where every book won the Hugo Award. The synopses on the back of N.K. Jemisin's books are quite vague in terms of plot, but I believe that this one takes place in a world where there are a lot of earthquakes, and there are some people who have the magic to control this, and they are highly coveted for their powers. I also have book one of the Dreamblood series by N.K. Jemisin, and this one, as you can imagine, centers around dream magic. In this story, there are people whose job it is to harvest magic from the minds of dreamers and use it to heal, soothe, and kill people who are judged corrupted. An author whose books I know next to nothing about is Cinda Williams-Chimer, who is a young adult fantasy author. I believe the starting point for her books is The Demon King, which is the first book in the Seven Realms series. This seems like a very classic fantasy. I have read the synopsis of this, but it's one of those that has a lot of elements, and I'm very bad at processing fantasy synopses without any kind of context. But I believe that this is a multi-perspective fantasy series that a lot of people really love, and there is also a spin-off series. I believe that that one is the Shattered Realms series, and as well as that there is the Air Chronicles. I'm not sure, but I think I've heard something about Cinda Williams-Chimer also writing another series or releasing a new series sometime soon, but I pretty much have never heard a bad word about Cinda Williams-Chimer, and because of that, they are an author I have been interested in for a very long time. And the last author I'm going to be talking about today is Mark Lawrence. Now, Mark Lawrence, I believe, has 3 series out so far and is releasing a book in 2020. I'm not sure if that will be the start of a new series, but it's called something like The Girl Made of Stars, and it sounds really interesting. But the series by Mark Lawrence I am most interested in reading is, of course, the Book of the Ancestor series, starting with Red Sister. This is a book series that has been compared to Nevernight numerous times. Nevernight is one of my favorite series. The main character in Red Sister is an assassin, and so for multiple reasons this series is very appealing to me. I believe in this series we follow a young girl called Nona Grey, who is an assassin nun, which is a really weird dynamic, and I'm not sure how that's going to work, but I'm definitely intrigued. Mark Lawrence is known for writing grimdark fantasy. There are a lot of trigger warnings in his book. Things are very gory and very in-depth on the hacking and slashing parts, which is something that I generally don't mind too much. I like it when my fantasy is really dark. And because of that, I would also like to read Prince of Fawns by Mark Lawrence, which is the first book in the Broken Empire series. I think that this one has a spin-off, and the first book in that might be called King of Thorns or King of Fools or something like that. This is one that I don't really know the plot of, but I know it follows a young boy who is a bloodthirsty killer. I know that there are lots of trigger warnings for this series in particular. There's sexual assault, there's gory, bloody, gruesome murder, because our main character is a killer without a conscience as far as I can tell, and he just enjoys tearing people to shreds. I'm less interested in this than Red Sister because this seems to be hit or miss with a lot of people, so I would very much like to get into Mark Lawrence through the Book of the Ancestor series, which a lot of people really love, before I try this one, because this does sound like something I like, but I do normally like my fantasies to be a little bit prosaical as well as dark, and I think that this is just a straight up bloodbath from cover to cover. So there you have it. Those are the 10 authors that I would very much like to read. I'm sure I'm going to revisit this video at some point in the future, which will be interesting because quite a few of the authors that I have mentioned today have some very long fantasy series that would take me years to wade through in normal circumstances. It's actually crazy to think that in another 2.5 years I may revisit this video. I have been a booktuber for 2.5 years now. If you double that, that's 5 years, and to be honest, the last 2.5 years feels like no time at all. So as somebody who's very scared of aging, that is that's quite a lot to think about. But please let me know if you have read from any of these authors and what you thought of them. Please also let me know if there are any authors with multiple works that you think that I should check out that I haven't already read. And of course, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to. If you head into my description box, you will find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram, Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.